He would talk, and he started laughing. He said, Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about? And I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, you know? And he started to laugh. He said, you're an idiot. And I said, why am I an idiot? He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded Women's Lib, you know? And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, and you want to know why? He says, there were two primary reasons. And they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before Women's Lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up their family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school, as the officials, as their family, not as the parents teaching them. And so those are the two primary reasons for Women's Lib, which I thought up to that point was a noble thing. You know, when I saw their intentions behind it, where they were coming from when they created it, the thought of it, I saw the evil behind what I thought was a noble venture.
This pill called Inovid is said to be a creation of Margaret Sanger and Gregory Pincus. But overall, there's not a lot more on this drug. But like I always say, follow the money. Who was a huge supporter of Margaret Sanger? From their website on the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. The Rockefeller family, especially John D. Rockefeller Jr., was an early advocate of Margaret Sanger's pioneering work in birth control as a means of improving maternal and public health. In 1942, when Sanger's Birth Control Federation of America joined the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, the RBF, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, began its own support for the organization. This was a cause in which founding trustee John D. Rockefeller III took particular interest. Gifts from the fund helped Planned Parenthood launch programs in child spacing, prenatal medical care, public education, and special projects in African American communities. Yeah. The fund significantly contributed to Planned Parenthood's national and New York City-based capital campaigns and enabled the National Research Council's Committee on Human Reproduction, acting as Planned Parenthood's research arm, to increase knowledge about infertility, maternal and neonatal mortality, clinical disorders, and population issues. RBF support for the organization continued through 1975. So, the Rockefeller family was completely a part of this as well, just so you can understand the control behind the scenes. Do you think that the general public knew this? No, of course not. But they still follow the agendas pushed on them. Anyways, the contraceptive pill was a game changer for feminism. It gave women more control over their reproductive rights, and within 5 years, around 6 million women were using it. Of course, this was televised.
I was willing to try anything that would give me life opportunities.
Which is how so many women began to take it in the first place. This pill was the first step in giving women control over their life. It was science interfering with Yah's design.
They ought to stop.
Well, I suppose a subject like that is really so personal that it's entirely up to the parents to decide. But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
The term eugenics is basically a set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population. Historically, by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior and promoting those judged to be superior. There have been various applications of eugenics, perhaps the most famous being the Germans before and during World War II, which was condemned by the Nuremberg war crimes trials. But the Germans did not invent eugenics. In fact, they were inspired by the founder of the taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood. The truth behind the genesis of that organization and its founder are much darker than most Americans realize. Who was the real Margaret Sanger? Why was she heralded by the Third Reich as the greatest socialist in America? Sanger also endorsed the 1927 decision Buck v. Bell, in which the Supreme Court ruled that states could forcibly sterilize people deemed unfit without their consent and sometimes without their knowledge. This American law would be the major defense at Nuremberg for the Nazi defendants who were doctors practicing Sanger's methods, and many would be found not guilty as a result of this defense. Supporters even today claim that she condemned abortion, arguing that it would not be needed if every woman had access to birth control. What they leave out is that Sanger only opposed abortions if that meant not producing the best, healthiest, most intelligent from Caucasian couples. For blacks, Jews, and brown-skinned people, as well as low IQ white people and those with birth defects, they were not to be allowed. Margaret Sanger was one of the few women to be given an honorific title and inducted into the Ku Klux Klan, and exalted by none other than Adolf Hitler and Dr. Joseph Goebbels. She was friends with the racist Democratic President Woodrow Wilson, Democratic fundraiser, and automobile maker Henry Ford, who was also friends with Adolf Hitler and a rabid anti-Semite and hater of black Americans. Margaret Sanger's rabid racism, anti-Semitism, and violent suggestions on eliminating all non-whites from American society endeared her to the eugenics crowd. She wanted an all-white, healthy, intelligent society built upon the concept of racial eradication years before Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were even a thought. In 1934, the Nazi Party adopted her radical positions, with Goebbels saying, "Margaret Sanger is the best National Socialist." The following quotes are directly from Margaret Sanger's own writings and interviews. 1. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. 2. A marriage license shall in itself give husband and wife only the right to a common household and not the right of parenthood. 3. All of our problems are the result of overbreeding among the working class. Knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. Its general, though prudent, practice must lead to a higher individuality and ultimately to a cleaner race. 4. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are a menace to the human race. 5. The masses of Negroes, particularly in the South, still breed carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. 6. Birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian churches. I look forward to seeing humanity free someday of the tyranny of Christianity, no less than capitalism. 7. Every single case of inherited defect, every malformed child, every congenitally tainted human being brought into this world is of infinite importance to that poor individual. But it is scarcely less important to the rest of us and to all of our children who must pay in one way or another for these biological and racial mistakes. 8. It now remains for the United States government to set a sensible example to the world by offering a bonus or a yearly pension to all obviously unfit parents who allow themselves to be sterilized by harmless and scientific means. In 1939, Sanger began what was called the Negro Project, alongside black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. This was the plan to have black doctors performing on black patients, to perpetuate the sterilization of blacks who were deemed inferior, as many black patients were suspicious of white doctors' services. In 2020, Planned Parenthood performed 383,460 abortions, the highest number of abortions it has yet reported, and an increase of nearly 28,600 from the previous year. And in the United States, the abortion rate for black women is almost 5 times that for white women.